Blessings, family. Hope you're having a great day. Just wanted to drop off some words to live by for you, as I have declared today to be Run the Tape Back Tuesday. Again, that's Run the Tape Back Tuesday. These words to live by are inspired by Galatians 6:4 as well as 2 Corinthians 13:5, with also getting some motivation from and some interviews by the head coach and Super Bowl MVP Doug Peterson and Nick Foles. So we'll start off with the scriptures. Galatians 6:4 says, "But let every person carefully scrutinize and examine and test his own conduct and his own work." And then it says, he can then have the personal satisfaction and joy of doing something commendable in itself alone without resorting to boastful comparison with his neighbor. And I see something now I didn't see before. And then 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, "Examine and test and evaluate your own selves to see whether you are holding to your faith and showing the proper fruits of it. Test and prove yourselves, not Christ. Do you not yourselves realize and know thoroughly by an ever-increasing experience that Jesus Christ is in you, unless you are counterfeits, disapproved, on trial, and rejected?" So, I'm watching a couple interviews, quite a few actually, interviews from the Super Bowl winning head coach Doug Peterson and the Super Bowl winning MVP Nick Foles, quarterback. And one of the interviews, the joint interview that they did, I think on NFL Network, there's a couple questions that were asked that just caught my attention. And those of you who know the story, especially those locally Philadelphia Eagles fans, know how when Carson Wentz went down and Nick Foles was going to be our starting quarterback, there was a lot of talk about, would he be able to take us to the Super Bowl? How was our season, and all those kind of questions. And even going back, and we found out later on in the year that, it wasn't so long ago, maybe a year or so, that he actually considered retiring. He had, in his own admission, even recently, he had lost the joy of playing, and he considered just retiring and giving up football. It wasn't until Doug Peterson went down and talked to him and convinced him to come up here and play again for this team again. But in them asking him a question, even after winning the Super Bowl, one of the things that impressed me, they said, is that you have to embrace failure, and you have to recognize your struggles and recognize that your struggles help you to grow. And even when they were interviewing head coach Doug Peterson, during a post-game interview, one of the former NFL players asked, what was it that he did or they did with Nick to retweak the offense to help them to be as successful as they were, and resulting in a Super Bowl win. And Doug said that it was just a matter of sitting down with Nick and having some conversations with Nick, and then going back and reviewing tape of his past performances when he played before, when he was playing well, when he was excelling. He said that basically, it was a matter of sitting down and having conversations with Nick, as well as going back and watching some of his old tape of his past successes and seeing what he had on film. So it was a matter of, Doug knew what was inside of Nick because he's known him since high school. And so he knew what was inside of Nick, and apparently Nick had maybe lost sight of what was inside of him. And so he pointed out to him what he's done in the past, what he did well. And so that was kind of pretty much what I wanted to point out on that part. And the fact of the matter was, Nick couldn't listen to what other people were saying about him. And some points, even in this instance, he had to stop listening to what he may have said to himself or thought about himself that would drive him to want to retire. And it just stuck out to me that us This is a lesson for us as parents. It's a lesson for us as mentors, as leaders, as ministers, that first of all, personally, when we've lost the joy of doing something, or when we don't feel we're up to doing something again, we have to run back the tape on our lives and go back to when things were going well. What were the things that we were doing? What were the things that we were doing consistently that caused us to have success and caused us to accomplish the things that God had called us to do? As far as being a mentor or a leader or a pastor, and those that we're pastoring or mentoring, sometimes we have to go back and look at their tape, look at the things that they used to do that caused them to be successful and cause them to be effective, and point those things out to them to get them back to a point of having the confidence, get them back to the point of doing the things that they used to do in order to be successful again. Because when it comes back to running back the tape, we even have another example in the Bible of David. And you know the story of David when he had volunteered to fight Goliath. First of all, Goliath even insulted him like, who am I that you would send this dog out against me? So I guess you could say that David was one of the first underdogs. But even Saul, was like, who are you? You're just a child. You can't do this. But see, instead of saying, you're right, I probably can't do this, what was I thinking? David ran back the tape on himself, and he ran back the tape and even pretty much played it for them. So look, when the bear came at me, at my father's sheep, I did this. And when the lion came and I did this, and I tore him up and tore him apart. And I'm going to do the same thing to this giant. So David knew how to run back the tape. And even not only that story, but there's so many other stories where David had to run the tape back on himself and think about how many times he was struggling and how God delivered him, how he cried out to God and God delivered him. So again, as I'm starting to lose my voice again, it is Run Back the Tape Tuesday, family. So let's remember to do that for ourselves when we find ourselves struggling and not being as successful as in ministry as we thought, and in life as we should be. But even as those that we're mentoring or ministering to, let's be an encouragement to them and encourage them to run back the tape on their lives and see the things that they did in the past that they did well, so they can get back to that same, if not better, level of effectiveness and success. These have been words to live by. May they bless you as well as those that you share them with. God bless.